From a humble beginning in 1963 with just 164 students, the University of Guyana has grown into a pillar of higher learning, now proudly home to over 11,000 students. What started with a focus on the arts, natural sciences, and social sciences has evolved into a powerhouse of education, offering over 180 internationally recognized programs across more than 80 disciplines, all spread across 2 campuses and 8 academic faculties. In a historic move to make education more accessible, 2025 sees the University of Guyana abolishing tuition fees, an impactful promise kept by President Irfaan Ali. Today on Sources, we will sit down with the Vice Chancellor of the University of Guyana, Professor Paloma Mohamed Martin. We'll discuss the institution's extraordinary growth, the challenges it faces, and the bold steps it will take to shape the future of education in Guyana. Hello, good evening, and welcome to Sources. I'm your host, Svetlana Marshall, and this evening we'll be talking about the University of Guyana. To do so with me, I have the Vice Chancellor, Professor Paloma Mohamed Martin. Professor, thank you so much for having me here today.
Thank you for inviting me, and congratulations on everything that you're doing.
Thank you so much. Professor, 62 years, if I could put that age, to the University of Guyana. It has made tremendous progress over the year. What is the driving force behind the university?
Well, the first thing is that the founding fathers of this country, Guyana, saw it fit to have a university that was going to be nationally oriented to our development. As you know, UG is 3 years older than the country. We were created in 1963, and the country became independent in 1966. And we hold the distinction of being the only university in the world that was created by a people who were still colonized. If you look back at the Hansard records of the debates in Parliament over the creation of the University of Guyana in prior to 1963 when it was established, the founders were concerned about 3 things. One, they wanted to make sure that you had a university that could train as many people as quickly and as efficiently and cheaply as possible. 2, they wanted to make sure that we could determine what we needed, what was taught. And 3, they wanted students who would emerge as students who were, nationally conscious. Right? And so the difference between our education and that of others that were around, in fact only one other at the time, which was UE, was that we were going to be trained for what our country needed specifically. And I think that's been the driving force. All of the work that has been done in the university over the last 62 years, we have just been responding to the needs of the country. For about 40 of those 62 years, we were the only university in the entire country. And so everything the country needed, we started a program for it, which is why we have 180 programs now, even though we're a mid-sized university.
And so you've moved from you had about less than 200 students when the university started, to now over 11,000 students.
Yes, we have. And we started with about 6 programs, and now we have 180 programs. We started with 3 faculties. Now we have 8 faculties and 11 institutes. We started with one campus at Turkine. Now we have 9 campuses across the country. And in the 9 campuses, I'm including the IDC campuses that are all the way from Lethem up to Berbice, Linden, Anna Regina, etc. So yes, the university has grown tremendously in the years that have interceded.
In 2020, you were appointed the 11th Vice Chancellor of the University of Guyana, and in fact, you were the first female Vice Chancellor. How did it feel back then, and what was the state of the university at the time?
That's a kind of introspective question. How did it feel? I was dealing at the time with quite a number of things. Personally, my sister-in-law had died and left her 3 little children, which I subsequently adopted during COVID. The university was basically face-to-face at the time. And so we had to make some decisions. And those decisions were, one, whether we would decide to wait until COVID ended, because people would still get paid, technically speaking, or we would pivot to an online platform and retool all our systems to deliver and to continue to deliver no matter what happened. And we did that, right? So I had no time really to think about my own feelings. And up to now, I'm kind of thinking about these things because people ask me and they force me to think. But I had no time to think about how I felt about anything. I had to really just deliver. I felt like a soldier almost. I'm serious. We were like, this is a national global emergency. What are we going to do with these? At the time we had 6,000 students. These students who are home, pent up, what's going to happen to their mental health? What's going to happen to the country when this is over and we don't graduate people to take up the needs and to fill the employment needs of the country, right? So we were all kind of like on just working on what was needed by others and not by ourselves. Now I can think about, one, what it means to other women to have a woman lead in such a capacity, what it means to young girls, because they come up to me all the time and speak to me about things, and I feel very humbled and very inspired and privileged to be doing this. I also think that the COVID period has taught us that women actually do lead in a different way than men in many cases. Their considerations of things to do with care and how they communicate and how they negotiate spaces. I think that has been really important to the university, that you had that very different touch, very different way of dealing with challenges. I'm not a confrontational kind of person. I am fairly strong though, but I try to negotiate, and I'm a Libra as well, so we go for balance, we try to do that. So I think in retrospect, while I could not feel anything other than what was happening around me and thinking about how to fix things, at this moment I think I feel humbled, I feel privileged. I feel also that I learned a lot and I grew a lot myself from this moment, and I think that I have a lot to share now, that so much time has passed in kind of understanding not only how I did what I did, but also what I also learned from the process.
Okay, and you spoke a bit about taking over at a time when the country and the world at large was faced with the COVID-19 pandemic. Help me understand the challenges. You spoke about transitioning to online platforms. Were you able to graduate the batch the following year? And what were some of the challenges that you had to confront at the time and you overcame?
Yeah, the challenges were many. The challenges were really, really many. COVID might have been, in a certain sense, a watershed moment for us, because when I took the university, when I became Vice Chancellor, but the year I was in transitional management the year before. So I was the chair of the transitional management committee while we looked for a Vice Chancellor, right? And in that period, I want to backtrack a little bit because I don't think people realize how much UG has changed within those 5 years. And it's very important for us to understand this. I took the university, and when I say, I shouldn't say I, because it's a team of us, and I really tried very hard to keep that team together, despite anything that might be happening internally, because that team had to work very hard, and I can't do any of this by myself, right? People have to trust what I say, or we have to together find solutions. So the university was at the time about $300 and something million in the red in 2019, right? And this had to do with not necessarily anybody doing anything wrong, right? But it had to do with the way in which we made decisions and the costing of our programs, because we were kept at $1,000 per program except for law and medicine. And when other universities in the same country were charging $300 per credit, we were offering about 16 credits a year or more for $1,000. So it was just not feasible. And so we had to make some really serious decisions about management, about budgeting, about cutting, about efficiency. And also, I also had to raise a lot of funds externally from donors and partners and so on. So that was the first major challenge. And we were able to do that in about a year, to bring it back on stream and come back into the black just around the end of 2019, coming into 2020. In 2020, the biggest challenge, if you would believe this, was the internal resistance of staff. Some of the staff to going online, right? People, and that's something that we kind of did not recover from until this year, because it took us longer than it should have taken us. It took us 6 weeks to get online, right? Because I knew right away what had to be done. But it took me 6 weeks to get certain powerful voices within the university to agree that we should do anything at all other than wait until COVID ended. And that was not an option that I was willing to consider. So some of them told me, oh, well, you could go online if you want, but we'll wait, and when COVID is finished, you can call us back. Well, guess what happened? 3 years later, right? We've gone past you. You have not gone online. You don't know anything that's going on. So we were training people at the same time. I was building the team at the same time. The Tactical Online Services Unit, which we didn't have at the university, I put 3 major teams in place. So the occupational health and safety, we had nobody. Now we have a whole office for that. So it was really important to keeping our staff safe. The Tactical Online Services Unit, which was going to not only train people how to get online, run our infrastructure, host our learning platform, deal with cybersecurity, etc. That was put in place. Also, our projects procurement and planning unit was also put in place, because that's the one that had to really get a grip on the spending and finding the best way to do those kinds of things. And then our Department of Events, Conferences and Communications, which was not only important to communicating with our staff and students, but also to helping us to kind of get students and put the word out about people who were helping us and supporting. So that work was being done at the same time. And I have to say that, in that period also, when staff was not all staff, but key figures were really resisting, I want to say again that our students, the students who are from the UG Student Society at the time, and other students who came out and supported us in teaching even some people in our bursary, right, had never touched a computer. So when I bought the computers and gave it to them, they remained in the boxes for like 2 months. And people were ashamed to say that everything was written down, a paper file. So we had to get students to come out during COVID to go and teach people. But they really, so the students helped and staff learned after a while, and then we had to learn Zoom. It was an interesting experience. And one of these days, I'm writing now, in between when I have time, this book called Changing UG, wow, which is a book really not only documenting that transition, because there have been 4 transitions in my time, in the short space of time, I think. But not only documenting those transitions, but also documenting things about how institutions really can change for the better, right? And I think that UG, the biggest joy for me is that I think UG changed for the better. And I don't think that I changed it for the better. I think I led it, I might have inspired it, but we were able to find in ourselves as a university community, what was our reason for doing what we do, right? Nobody brought us here and forced us to do these jobs. We were doing these jobs because we loved teaching. We wanted to lift people up. We wanted people to succeed. We were created to really develop our country. And that clarity came again to us during that period, because we had meetings 1 o'clock in the morning, but people hardly slept. because we couldn't, right? So that period was a period of great cohesion, difficulty, yes, but it was where our love came out, you know, and I think that that is, for me, the greatest lesson. Yeah.
Okay. Congrats on your book in advance.
Thank you.
And you spoke about 4 major events
Yeah.
happening during your time in office. I want you to speak about those 4 major events, but also what would you say would be some of your greatest achievements in changing UG into what it is today and what it will be in the future?
Well, what it will be in the future, that's something I have to think about. But let's talk about what I consider to be the 4, you know, points of transition in a sense. So the first one was 2018, 2019, when I took the chair of the Transition Management Committee after a very sad departure of what I think is a vice chancellor was progressive, but just did not have the time and may have been not able to get grounded enough, right? Because vice chancellors at UG were given 3 years, right? If you're parachuting or coming from a different place, by the time you learn the place, it's done and you're done first. So this is something that I'm totally against. I've been against it for a long time. So, but that vice chancellor left, and then we were in this very turbulent period, and then that turbulent period coincided with a turbulent election period, and the first major thing was the politics and the university. I am completely not interested in partisan politics at all, as a person, as a vice chancellor. And the university is a microcosm of the wider society. So you can't tell people anything about their political whatever they want to do. That's constitutionally protected. But as an institution, I wanted us to remain outside of any political, direct political activity at all. And convincing the university of all the various constituents, because you know what was going on, to just stay out institutionally, just wait. Whatever happened, we would be there as state to pick up the pieces and do whatever. That was difficult, right? So those 2 things coincided. And then the search for the vice chancellor. A lot of people don't remember, but they could go back into the media and check that I am now leading a transition. And several things happened inside the university, which I'm not going to bother. I'll document it in my book later, but which will be very fascinating for people to read. Probably going to be a drama and a thriller, but people will say this woman is make up stories, but there are people alive who could attest that these things actually happened, right? And they were present. But the second thing is that you had a year-long search for a vice chancellor, a whole year. And I was very reluctant, very reluctant to be in. I didn't really, at that point, want to be in the top spot because I had other things I was doing. I really did not, and as a person, I don't like to commit to things, right? Because if I commit to something, I'm in 1,000%, right? And it consumes me. And I was like, you know, at this point in my life, I don't really want to be completely consumed. But then COVID came, and there are a couple of powerful interests inside the university who said to me, like, if you don't put your application in, we're going to put it in for you. And I was like, no. If this is going to happen, then let's do it properly. So in the middle of all of this, I'm there trying to get my application together. And then I was not given any special treatment. In fact, I think I was treated much harsher than the people externally. In terms of the interview process was long. I'm there trying to deal with COVID, and still they expect me to deliver all these things, and I had to do that. So that was one thing. And then, of course, the announcement and what happened thereafter of my appointment as Vice Chancellor, which remains one of the most perplexing things in my life, and a sad thing in my life. But I understand it, and I've let it go. But it should not have happened the way it happened, because I have no political sponsor anywhere, right? I came out of the university. I was here for 12 years before that. And several external panels had chosen who they thought was the right person. And in retrospect, I think they were right. because nobody in the middle of COVID could have come from outside the university and run it. They would just, nobody would be here. They wouldn't know how to run it, right? So that was difficult, really difficult. And it was difficult also because of my children. You know, when people say things about a parent or so on, they don't think that they're little children, or like, you know, my mom, you know, who knew that a lot of this was not true. So that was what that was. And so that was the challenge. And then, of course, we had COVID, which I've spoken about. Mm-hmm. And then after that, now we have this a new government, a new administration in place, and negotiating the relationship with the state is always something that any leader in this kind of position has to be able to do. And it is not an easy thing, because there's a lot of distrust between the two entities, and I was often caught in the middle trying to kind of manage it. But again, I guess because I am straight up with everybody, I may not speak publicly, but internally we have frank conversations and honest ones. I think we've been able to navigate that fairly well, because everything about what my leadership in this point is about the technical work we have to do. I'm not in any kind of anything else. We are the technical arm of the state to deliver the people, to do the technical work, to create policy, to support what the state needs. And this is everybody in the state. That's not one aspect, not one part of the state. So that has been something, a growth point for me. I had no experience really in it, but I think we learned, right, from each other. And now, free education, free tuition, right? Now this one is, I think, if I have to look back at all of the others, I suspect that this one is going to be the most challenging of all.
So right? we're gonna get to that. We're gonna get to that. But before we do, I wanted you to talk about the university for the first time in more than 60 years.
Yes.
Was accredited.
Oh yeah.
What does that mean for the university? What does it mean for students of the university, graduates?
Oh, and we are so delighted about that, because the institutional accreditation, people have to understand the difference between the two, right? I'll just spend a minute. Mm-hmm. So you have program accreditation. Yeah. So some disciplines have accreditations and licensure that is needed for people to be able to get jobs or to work overseas or to have those degrees, what we call internationally recognized. And so we had the medical school, we had some programs in technology, etc., and some other places. But the university itself as an institution, the total university, had never enjoyed that. And part of that was because we predated the National Accreditation Council by 20-something years or more, right? And to put together what they call the self-study, our self-study was something like 6,000 pages.
Oh, wow.
Whereas other universities that just started, they have 100 pages, 200. To find all those historical documents and all the accounting and all those things that was necessary to pass that stage, to go on to this stage, was a lot. It took years. And I really want to thank the team led by Professor Cummings and others for doing that work. But what it means is that the university now can say that all its programs as an institution are institutionally accredited. We're still working on some for the other programs, but we have, as I said, several. And it's a monkey off our back. You know, this is something that people who just came up 2 days ago would, you know, say, oh, UG is not accredited, and it would be something that would be really smart. I would be really upset. But then it was the truth. You couldn't say anything. But my answer is always, the proof of the matter is the proof of the pudding is in the eating. So let's get it done, right? And so for all of those who were on our case, you know, for all the years, I would say thank you for, you know, kind of giving us the push to do it. But it basically means that we've done it. But now it is something that is only for a couple of years. You have to keep the standards up. You have to keep improving. And it is not something that is an event. It's a process, right? We're happy to have it done.
And recently I saw that the university commissioned the College of Medical Sciences. That's another major achievement.
Yeah.
And you, during the commissioning ceremony, you spoke about the acceptance rate and the ability to accept students. Could you expand on that for me?
Yeah, so we commissioned the building, not the College of Medical Sciences. I just want to be clear, because the College of Medical Sciences, as you would have heard, is about 30 or 40 years old, right? But the new building, which is beautiful, I think it's
definitely
it's really one of the best building.
Yeah.
Our professor Cummings would say it's the best building in the country, right? He said, and we say no, it's the best building in the world to you, because he's so happy about it. But So, but what that particular building is going to allow us to do for the College of Medical Sciences programs, which they offer 14 different programs through 6 different schools. And here I want to give a shout out to the MedTech department and the MedTech students who are doing a wonderful job. Often they don't get recognized, but we really want to applaud you for what you do in a quiet way. So, what that is going to do is allow us to take in, depending on the program, between 20 and 40% more of the students because of across the board, because of the space, the teaching space, the size of the labs that are there. Not only the size of the labs, but the way in which the labs are equipped. And so that is going to be a major game changer. But that plays in, of course, to what the university itself, prior to all of this, because in 2017 and 2018 we had done this project which I had led as Deputy Vice Chancellor to create a blueprint for the university. And we were looking at all of I think about 18 different parameters in which the universities was kind of nestled, the environment. So it was changes in environment, changes in the population size, the composition of population, the move from the extractive into the extractive indices, and what that would do to the kind of GDP, and how it would bring migrants into the country, and what that would do to language, and all kinds of things we were looking at. And we created this blueprint, and we came up with 4 simple aspirational goals. The first one is at least 1 graduate per household, because you can't change a country by educating people to the level of university and post-secondary by only people on the coast. And when I looked at our profile prior to 2019, we saw that less than 3% of our students were coming from regions 7, 8, 9, 1, 2, right? And we said, no, this can't be. We have to make sure that every household, each one, has at least 1 graduate, because that changes the trajectory of the family and anybody else looking on, right? Really tremendously. It really changes the lives of people, right? And we wanted that for the whole country. And so we calculated that between now and 2040, because our blueprint is called Blueprint 2040, when we'll be 75 years old. There's no political anything in it. It was just where we thought we could model fairly accurately in the medium to long term. And we said, right, so that means we're going from 6,000 students in 2018, 2019 to 30,000 students in 2040. That meant that we have to add 1,000 students at least a year. So we knew that before COVID. We were already planning for that. What we didn't know was how we were going to do it, and that we were going to have to be forced to do it so fast. And as you can see, between 2019, 2020, and now, we're now up to 11,000, almost 12,000 students. So we're the only university in this whole region, right, that has been able to increase its numbers, because numbers have fallen off, dramatically for many reasons, which I won't go into. So we have been able to maintain either between 900 to 1,200 students a year in an increase. What free tuition? You didn't ask me that question.
No, I'm getting there.
Well, let me go to it then.
Yeah.
What free tuition is going to do is to help us, if we are conscientious and really careful about how we apply the gift, the generosity of the state, to all its people. It's how we are able to now fulfill that mandate. of at least one graduate per household, because prior to now, the three variables that determined whether you would get into university or not, three main ones. One, did you apply? Two, when you applied, did you meet the minimum requirements, right? Three, could you pay? Now, we taken out, could you pay? And once the state is paying, it means that we have to find a way to ensure that students from all across the country are able to get a chance. So our composition in the next 2 or 3 years, in terms of how many from each region, etc., and so on, has to change. And we spent a lot of time in the last couple of months, once we knew the date, to try to work out how we deal with the metrics, how we deal with the quotas, because we can't take everybody, right? And we expect to see about a 30% increase in application rates, right? Wow. That's what the literature where this has happened across the world has said. Guyana might even exceed that, given our economic prospects, and that so many people are going to want to try and change their lives through education, in this level of education, right? So we're bracing. We opened applications 2 days ago, and we're bracing for the influx and to see how we're going to do it. Yeah.
When you say 30% increase in application, what that means? How many?
Yeah.
How many?
So we usually get between 13 and 16,000 applications a year. We only are able to take in about 3,000, right? Now, of the 13 and 16,000 applications we get, maybe 50% won't be good, meaning that they don't meet the minimum requirements. But the other 8,000 or so, 7 or 8,000, half of those will not get in. They will not get in because we don't have the space, right, to put them in. And that is always heartbreaking for all of us. I mean, it is terrible. Some of them will accept and they drop out because they can't pay. We have not been forcing them to pay for the last 4 years. We've just said, look, pay when you can, pay as you go, all kinds of things. So a lot of students got away with practically free education over the last 4 years, and the government did, in all fairness, step up in December to pay for about half of them. We're negotiating how we're getting the rest now, but I'm happy to see that they're going to, I think we all are, they're going to be able to work and have a good degree and change their lives, right? So what this means, the 30% means that you're looking now at maybe, I would say, 20,000 applicants, right? And we try to add 2,000 more this year.
So 5,000 you're looking
right?
to
We're going to try to accept 5,000, but it depends on the capacity and the discipline. Because in certain disciplines, for accreditation purposes and so on, you can't, the ratio of student to lecturer, student to seats, student to lab seats, student to hospital placements if it's medical school and all of that, that is a very delicate kind of dance, so to speak, negotiation, and we have to keep it in certain regulations. So we're trying our best, right? But the other thing is we can't do those numbers if we don't have online. No way.
And I was going to ask you about online, because I know there was a conversation, and in fact I've seen reports in which the university was criticized for still facilitating, in a sense, online programs. It was said, and I remember attending an event in which the Minister of Education spoke about this. She said, yes, there was the pandemic, and we all know that there was a pandemic, and there was a need for you to go virtually, to have virtual classes online. But now the pandemic is long gone, and some of the classes are still fully online. Is that so? And if so, why?
Yeah, some of the classes are still fully online. Definitely they are still fully online, and the only way we can fulfill the mandate for the country is that we have to stay fully online for some. And there are 5 parameters that decide. So first of all, our Teachers College, which is the second largest faculty in the university. And as you know, the minister herself commissioned the online teaching platform for us in 2022. And that because she really wanted to ensure that teachers did not have to leave the classrooms and come down to classes, especially those in the areas outside of Georgetown, where they had to literally leave their homes, etc. because we had this learning loss during COVID. So people think that COVID, the pandemic is over, but the effects of COVID are not over. We have to keep the teachers in the schools so they could teach the children. And that's what she wanted, and that's what we did. So about 2,000 or so, or 2,000 to 3,000 of our students have to be online because we were asked to do it, and we did it. That's one. So that's one parameter. The second parameter is a lot of our students are students who are first responders. So people like firemen, soldiers, doctors, nurses, etc. And for instance, when we had the Venezuela, in December 2023, that horrible period, a lot of our students were called in to kind of be on standby or whatever they call it. Some of them were deployed, and because we had the online capability, they could still do their studies and so on, right? So it didn't interrupt anything. The other thing is that sometimes nowadays, with all the development that's happening in the country, I heard a figure the other day that there are about 5 times the number of cars in the country in 2025 than they were in 2020. Right, kind of an index of prosperity, I guess. But it also stresses us out getting to campus, right? So there are students who will leave their work and they're online for half the class because they're traveling in traffic, and then they come out and then they come into class. So we have blended classes. And the fourth fallacy is that we have students who were, during COVID, were all over the world. We never asked students where you were. We never had that criteria on our form. But now these students came in 2020, they're going to graduate in 2024. 21, they're going to graduate in 2025. 23, 22, they're going to graduate in 2026. They're living in New York. They're living in Paramakatoy. They're living in Russia. They're living in Pakistan, Nigeria, St. Kitts, all over. We have students on the campus from 43 different countries. When I say on the campus, enrolled. What are we going to tell those students? You got to come, leave your country now and come to Guyana to do, when you were enrolled and your expectation legitimately and legally this was an online degree. So we have to transition those out, right? And then finally, the last big myth is that everybody is online still. And that is not so. Since 2021, College of Medical Sciences had their students come back, right, for most of the courses that had labs. Faculty of Technology never allowed their students to be online. I remember somebody, when I was saying this in 2020, that they had to be online. Guy said, when you could tell me how you could learn to swim online, I will tell my students to come online. So they never, Faculty of Agriculture, right, never allowed their students to be completely online. Earth and Environmental Sciences also are kind of half and half. And now that we have, the facilities, everything is in place in a certain sense, most things, they're blending more. What a lot of people also did not know is why we couldn't bring people online. The University of Guyana was changing its entire sewage system during this whole, from 2019. And that was a project that took 5 years to do. Right? If you would come on this campus 3 years ago, you'd see everywhere dug up like mud, and it was driving me nuts. But it was a necessary thing because the sewage system, as you rightly said during your beginning introduction, was created for 600 students. Now we have 12,000 and 1,500 staff and about 2,000 visitors a month, right? Who have to use the bathroom, unfortunately, and do other things. And our sewage system was failing. So we couldn't bring students onto the campus to do that because we didn't have the sanitary facilities. And the last thing is, this university was built, and we've done a lot of physical infrastructural works, but many of our buildings, over 80% of our buildings are old. They were built within the last 50 years. We have new buildings like the new one, but they're not enough. We don't have enough dorm spaces right now, right, for students who are going to come from out of town, right? We don't have enough classroom spaces for 12,000 students. So we have to find ways to meet the national need as well as to build the university's infrastructure up at the same time. And both of them, I hope, these needs will converge, I think, hopefully in another 2 or 3 years. But right now, the only way to do it is either somebody gives us a huge amount of money to rent a whole set of spaces around, and I'd be happy, that's okay. But I don't think the students will be happy, because some of them are students with commitments, living far, etc., and out of the country and all of these things. What being online allows us to do is to be flexible, right? So when, for instance, Venezuela, if there's a flood, if there's another crisis, university can pivot very, very quickly to online, and we can still continue our business, not as normal, but we can continue our business. And we invested a lot in the infrastructure, in training. I hear people saying things like, oh, Zoom is not, I like, you guys don't have any idea what the kind of infrastructure UG has for online. It's not perfect, but it's a massive infrastructure. And there are people in the university who have been continuously trained, lecturers and so on, to do things. Now, all of them do not do what they're supposed to do, right? I know this, we're not perfect. But I would say 80% of them do. And I would really be very sad if we were ever forced in any way, shape, or form to dismantle that online capacity, because that is the capacity that allowed this country to see, within the last 4 years, over 20,000 graduates from this university. And those people have, most of them, been absorbed into the local workforce, and some of them are serving the region. If we didn't have that big gap, and the gap that we have would still be there, and a bigger one would be there. I know that's a mouthful, you probably have to do a lot of editing, but it's a subject that I'm very, very, invested in, because I think there's a lot of misinformation and miscommunication and misunderstanding out there. And of course, unfortunately, when you have opinion leaders who say things without the total context being known, people just run with it. And of course, that's normal for people, but it's our responsibility, because we are spending the nation's money, but also we are delivering as best as we could, and I think way above our weight. Mm-hmm. We could do better, and once we are supported to do better, we will.
And you spoke about spending the nation's money, and oftentimes when it's referenced that, oh, the university is now free, mm-hmm. but when it was the lead up to this, it was said that Guyanese must have value for the money, and we should. Yeah. But do you think the university is providing us with that value?
Well, absolutely. Now, should I speak to this point? Because, for instance, in this very same country, right, that we have, universities, other universities, and I'm not throwing shade on anybody, I believe that we need everybody, all the other entities, once they're run well. Right? But comparatively in terms of cost, let's go to cost first. As I indicated before, University of Guyana offers people were paying $1,000 a year US for an entire program. When per credit, now each course is 4 credits. Per credit, some universities are charging $300 US per credit. So for one course, a year at UG is 8 courses or 9. For one course at another place in this same country, don't let's even go out of the country, you were going to pay $1,100 US per one course. If you're going to multiply that by 8, you do the maths. You're up to almost $10,000 a year. UG was charging $1,000. Tell me if that's not value for money. That's one. The second thing is, our staff and our students, our staff mainly, have been working way below what others are getting paid for in similar positions, right? I believe that they have been subsidizing the education of students in the university by accepting these wages and conditions, right? Which are improving steadily, but still, they still have a ways to go. So that is value for money, because they're investing sweat equity into students. Look at the range of programs that the university is delivering, right? And how many students this university is delivering annually, right? You put all the technical institutes together and all of the the post-secondary institutions in the country together, all, including the offshore universities. They don't get up to 3,500 and 3,900 graduates as the University of Guyana has done in the last graduation, right? And then, finally, we are also looking at, the research capacity, the policy capacity the university brings to the country. So I think in all of those areas, while yes, I do agree, we need to be doing better. We can be doing better once we're supported to do that. But in terms of the cost of what we get in comparison to what other similar universities of the same size in the world are doing, right? It is remarkable that UGE has still been able to do it, and I think it is a largely due to how much the people who work here generally invest, because they, like I said, they love what they do. They really are here because they want to lift people up and see them do better. So I would say a resounding yes, and I'm willing to argue that and provide evidence to anybody that if you're going to give me $10 and I will deliver to you $100, that's value.
Okay. So now this year, the university is going to get $13 billion. And this is, some may say, a significant increase when it compared to the $4 billion plus dollars the university would have received in the past.
Yeah.
But now the university is free.
Well, tuition is free.
Tuition is free. Is this enough? One,
No.
and how do you navigate? You spoke a bit about.
Yeah. So I want to clarify the difference in the funding model, because it's the funding model that has changed, not the amount.
Okay.
Right? And I'll tell you why I say that. So we were getting from the government a subvention that practically paid between 40 and 60% of salaries only. Everything else was paid for by the students' fees, right? And some services that we would provide. And so the university's total budget over the last few years has been in the vicinity of 12 billion dollars. So while we would get 4 point something, the rest we would get from fees and from services and from grants and gifts and all kinds of a mix of things, right? And we rent some of our facilities and so on. So a mix of things, small amounts. What the model now is that part of the budget that was funded by students individually is now taken up by the government. And so they have committed to funding the whole budget with regard to tuition and so on. But our application to the government this year was for $14.1 billion, right? And we got 13. Now, the 1 billion that, just 900 and something, it's not completely 1 billion, that we did not get approved for were for those infrastructural things that we know we have to do in order to expand the numbers and so on. Now, there's a conversation going on about how that's going to happen. So that's not a criticism. It might come from elsewhere, but I'm just simply saying. So the operations of the university have not drastically changed. In fact, we are basically the extra that from 11.6 last year that was our operational budget to the 13 is largely to do with the increases in salaries that were announced across the board in December last year, largely, right? What it means, though, is that we don't have to be chasing after students for money, because for the last 4 or 5 years, it has been hell trying to do that and to manage the cash flow. So we really are thankful. I am thankful that we are going to be able to at least know that that's allocated by the government. The other fallacy that the other thing that people don't understand is that when you are receiving money from a government subvention, they don't say, oh, when the minister announces, oh, X amount of money, they don't say, oh, January or February, here is all the money. They don't do that. Every month you now have to go and say, this is what we need for this month, and we have to ask for it in advance, and then we have to account for what we did the last month, et cetera, as against accounting at the end of the year when we were managing our own funds largely, right? So that has required a different kind of accounting system and different reporting system and all those kinds of things, which we are doing, and I think we've adjusted fairly quickly and very well to doing that. But it doesn't allow you a lot of flexibility, because once they allocate to certain areas, if something comes up, right, which always does, we have 90 buildings to deal with. Every 5 minutes something is broken, something is leaking, something, but you have X amount of money in your maintenance budget. You can't just go take it and fix it. You have to go and get permission and all of those kinds of things. So, but that's accountability. We don't have a problem with that. But the flexibility of managing a huge enterprise like this without fat to do it, to respond to kind of unexpected things is going to be challenging in the first instance until we begin. We still do need support, and we'll get some of it from donors and so on, right? Because anyway, that's one of the things. But that needs to be known, because people might think that, oh, you just collect. We don't have the 13 million. Ministry of Finance has it, and they're giving us in pieces as we ask and we account for.
Okay. Well, I learned something, because I really thought that you were going to get the lump sum.
No, nobody gets it. It's not, and I want to say that this is not something specific to UG, right? Okay. This is how government accounting works across the line. They never are able to, and I don't think they should, give you all the money one time. They have their own accounting and their procedures, but that's what is happening now. And at first, when we were collecting our fees, we had periods in which we knew that we would collect at the beginning of the semester, we'll get a lump sum, so we could manage that. The end, but coming to graduation, you'll get so much coming in from fees, but this is a completely different ball game. But our bursary team they're up to it, and they've been working really hard to try to make sure that we change all our systems over and do what is required.
Professor, as we wind down to the end of our program, I would love for you to address the blueprint. I know you mentioned it earlier, to have at least one graduate per household, pushing the university towards about 30,000 students by 2040. But how do you envisage the university by then? What are some of the newer programs you're working towards to respond to the needs of the country? And if you could briefly talk about programs you've added already.
Yeah. So the blueprint has 4 aspirational goals. I've spoken about one.
You did.
The one graduate per household. The other one is to be a center of excellence for research and innovation in certain specific areas, which I won't go into. The other one is to be a center for solving the big problems of our country and the region, and sometimes globally, because already we have our Faculty of Earth and Environmental Sciences is noted among the top centers for environmental studies in the world. A couple of years ago, I think 2 years ago, we were number 5 in the world. So we're doing that work. And the one that I think is really the most important, and that is that we want to be a university that's fit for purpose, that's a model for the nation, and produces successful citizens. So anywhere in the world they go, they must be successful, and they must be model citizens, right? So how are we doing this? So I've already talked about the policies that we've in the last 5 years, we've created about 90 different policies within the university, because the university is very rules-based. So people will not implement until you have a policy or a piece of paper saying, oh, we could do this. They'll just tell you, well, we don't have a policy for that, and they're not doing it. So we're creating policy to ensure we do that. And one of the policies is the policy for vulnerable communities and underserved communities, where we had already started keeping a quota for students from regions, small regions that are underrepresented in our population. The second thing is that we did this very massive program with ExxonMobil Foundation, with CGX, Trent University, and ASU, where they funded, between them, ExxonMobil Foundation funded 40 PhDs for the university who came back a year ago. And that changes fundamentally not only the research output of the university, but the capacity of people to create policy, bring resources to the university, and to teach it at a higher level and at postgraduate and graduate levels. So within the last 5 years, we have added 20 graduate and postgraduate programs to the university. We've added another 25 undergraduate programs that are things like marine sciences and those kinds of things that are now aligned with our new industries that we have. We're adding some more, right? We have created a hub, a research hub, so anybody could go online right now and see all the research that UG has done. And what has that done? That has moved the University of Guyana 300 places up in international university rankings, right? So we, from near the middle to the bottom, we're now in the top middle, right? I would hope that in the next 5 years, we're going to be in the top 100, right? We have to be. We have the resources, we have the mental abilities to do this, and the country has the resources to do that now. So that's one of the things we're going to do. And one of the things, the other thing is, of course, how do you create a model citizen? How do you create a citizen who is not only technically adroit, but is not going to be cursing people out in the worst possible way on Facebook, or, you know, jumping out in the middle of the road and in road rage or driving badly or something? How do you, that is really, I think, what a university should be able to do at its optimal. Create a product. You come in as a rough diamond in the rough. We create you, polish you up, and make you into a beautiful jewel that is remarkable and outstanding, and that people can, you know, it's a model. People could want to replicate that. And that has to do with ourselves, right? This question of accountability internally. How do we conduct ourselves as the academy? How do we speak to each other? How do we account for monies? How do we account for gifts? How do we account for our time that is being paid for? How do we perform? How do we prepare? How do we present ourselves? How do we show up for our students, for the country, for whatever? That's part of what we are working on internally as faculty and staff. The second thing is, what opportunities outside of the university are we providing for our students? We are providing for, right now, all university students, doesn't matter what discipline you are, you have to do an internship. You must, right? And we're working very closely now with industry. We've already had those relationships with government ministries, but private industry, to make sure that what they need is now integrated into our curriculum through advisory boards. So many of them are on advisory boards for our faculty, so they can know what we're doing. They can see if they like that, or if we need to do something differently. But also they can take our students. And then finally, our international image. The country is on the international stage. There is no part of this country that is not going to be up for scrutiny. And therefore, the national university has got to operate at a very, very high intellectual and international level. It has to. And so, as we are sought after by others for partnerships and for research projects and for exchanging students and all those kinds of things, all those are things that were kind of, you know, in the background in the last couple of years. But all of those things are being worked on at the same time. There is a massive effort inside the university to basically raise the standards of every single thing that we do across the board. Everybody is working overtime. Few people are sleeping, which is not good. See how old I've gotten in the last 5 years, right? With gray hairs and all kinds of things. With this university, it's been worth it for that time. And so what we want to see is a top-tier, world-class university producing the best graduates, producing world-class research, and operating in the most transparent, efficient, and accountable manner. That's what we want to see. And we want it to be big enough to serve the country, so we could fulfill this aim of having at least, don't forget at least, we didn't stop at one, we said at least one graduate per household. So, last thing I want to talk about is our Macatau campus. The only campus in the world that is co-created with an indigenous community, right? That Macatau campus was launched last year. We're taking in our first group of students. this year, in this coming semester. And that is also speaks to how we are ensuring that all aspects, everybody in the country, no matter how remote you are, you got to fly for 2.5 hours to get to those people, right? But they are willing and they're so diligent and they want this so much that we said, okay, we'll work on it. So there is a lot going on across the country. Our IDC campus is opening in Lethem this another month or so. I think they have a consultation this week or two. So that is not a simple project. We have just touched the tip of the iceberg of what has to happen. But I think what is the most important thing, and you had asked me this question, I didn't answer you in the beginning, was, what do I think is the most important kind of the hallmark of my own period, this period in the university's history. And I think it is a laser sharp focus, clarity on what we have to do and who we are, and a real willingness to try to ensure that we do the best we can with what we have, right? And that we never say no to a problem. We are can do, right? We don't know how to do it, but we'll figure it out, because we are, bar none, the largest repository of intelligence in this country, the largest. You have 1,500 people who are the brightest people in this country in this place. And you have, and I'm not leaving out our students, 12,000 students who are the brightest in the country in this place. And you have 70,000 of our alum who were the brightest in the past all over the world. That is a huge legacy, and it is something that I think can do this country really well.
Professor, closing remarks.
Well, just thank you very much for being here, and just wanted to tell persons who are hesitating, especially high school students who are writing CXC and CAPE, and who might think that they have to wait until they get their results to apply. We open our applications on April the 2nd. We'll be closing them on May the 16th, I believe, or 14th. And so that's just 6 weeks. You need to apply now. If you are a high school student and you want to come to the University of Guyana, please tick when you apply that you want CXC to release your results to us as soon as they're available, and they'll do that, so it shortens the time. And we can also, of course, in certain programs, admit provisionally. So if you are interested, apply now. We're not going to have this opportunity open for a very long time, and so take advantage of what is given to you. And the last thing I want to say, education, any good education, is going to change your life and the lives of your family and those who are close to you and those who are even observing you. So take the opportunities that are available to you, and I wish you all the very best of luck.
Thank you so much, Professor. And you've heard, apply now. The time to apply is now. Professor, thank you so much for being a part of this program and sharing so much about the work the university is doing. And to our audience, thank you for listening. With that, we've come to the end of this edition of Sources. I've been your host, Svetlana Marshall.